Mr. Chairman, Ms. Kirsten, if I could inquire, as I understood the thrust of your testimony, and I hope I'm not misstating this, that your opposition centered on the inability of a same-sex couple to have children as a heterosexual couple. Is that correct?
Ms. Kirsten.
Mr. Chair and committee member, you could say that, but would you explain exactly what you mean?
Well, I was just asking, Mr. Chairman, whether or not, again, what I took from your testimony was that you felt the legalization of same-sex marriage was contrary to what is the essence of marriage, which is the procreation of children. At least that's what I took from the testimony. Am I misstating that?
Well, it's much larger than that, because, as I said when I listed the potential consequences over time, this would undermine the marriage culture for everyone. For example, if emotional intensity becomes the only criterion for marriage, of course, there's no need for a permanent relationship, because when emotional intensity fades, it makes no sense to continue the relationship. There's no reason for a relationship involving only two people, because, of course, you can have an emotionally intense relationship involving with a number of people. Bisexual people, for example, could very logically claim that they had a right to marry both a man and a woman whom they loved. When you change the defining criteria for marriage from a man and a woman who come together and are able to get a child, unlike any other relationship, then you open the floodgates and marriage becomes undefined.
Okay. Senator Cohen. So Mr. Chairman, Ms. Kirsten, then that begs the question, maybe it's a little bit cliched. The couple that gets married, man and woman, who are an older couple, it's a second marriage for both, clearly past childbearing years. The other such marriages where there's the inability to have children, a younger couple where there are fertility questions. I mean, your testimony then suggests those marriages are secondary to the marriage of the couple who can bear children. That, Mr. Chairman and Ms. Kirsten, that's certainly the logical inference then you can draw from your testimony.
Mr. Chair and Senator, that is not the case. As I mentioned when I testified, an older couple or an infertile male and female couple can offer both a mother and a father to a child they have unintentionally, to a child they adopt. The importance of male and female complementarity is central to marriage. And when you remove that qualification, you dilute the meaning of marriage. You directly challenge the meaning of marriage if you attempt to redefine marriage in a way that would include two or more people of the same sex.
So Mr. Chairman, Ms. Kirsten, let me ask one other question. This was it Professor Carpenter?
Yes,
I believe talked about the history of the Minnesota Human Rights Statute. If I can ask, because obviously you've been an editorial writer in the Star Tribune for a period of time. You've been active in public life in a variety of ways. 20 years ago, did you support inclusion of sexual orientation in the Minnesota Human Rights Statute?
Ms. Kirsten.
20 years ago, I did not write about that subject, Senator.
And that's fine. Did you support inclusion of sexual orientation in the Human Rights Statute as a citizen of Minnesota?
Ms. Kirsten.
Senator, Chair and Senator, I would say no, that I would not, because of the ways that this can be abused. And I could expound upon that.
Mr. Chairman, that's not necessary. I just wanted to understand the continuation and circumstances of your positions relative to gay and lesbian rights in the state. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, could I ask another witness to a couple questions?
Yes, Senator Cohen.
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Senator Ortman.
I think he's trying to characterize what she has said very unfairly, and I think she can speak for herself on her views. I think it's not right for a member here to cast such a generalization over someone's views. I just want to say that. I think that's very unkind and unfair.
Well, Senator Ortman, I'm not going to censor what members of the committee say in that
Mr.
respect,
Chairman, she does all the
any-
time with me, so...
of any of the members.
Mr.
Mostly
Chair,
you let me, so.
Senator Cohen
might
said
I
it better than I
respond?
was going to say it.
Well, Mr. Chair, at least you could allow the witness to respond to a comment like that from a member. I would hope you would if I had made the same error.
I will afford the same rights to those of any member of this committee that makes such a comment if the witness wishes to respond. Ms. Kirsten, do you wish to respond briefly
Mr. Chair
to that?
and Senator, I believe that all Minnesotans should be treated with respect and dignity in every aspect of their life, whether the politically freighted and human rights law that is so open to ideological manipulation and is part and parcel of a growing machinery of government that can be used as an ideological bludgeon. That is a very different question. But I firmly believe in the equal dignity of every Minnesotan on every front.
And Ms. Kirsten, Senator Cohen?
No, I wasn't going to say anything to Ms. Kirsten.
I was just going to.
Good call.
I was just going to pipe in. I recall from historically and from my own family's involvement the exact same debate that occurred at the inception of the fair housing laws in Minnesota as well, that addressed questions of race discrimination in housing. And you could simply substitute terminology here today for the discussion in 1956, if I recall. And it would take on exactly the same character. Senator Cohen, did you have anything?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I don't mean to make light of in a very serious discussion, but when I made that quip relative to not paying attention to me, whatever, it wasn't Ms. Kirsten, it was Senator Ortman, who never pays attention to me. So, Mr. Chairman, could I ask a question of another witness?
Yes, Senator Cohen. Thank you, Ms.
And again, I'm not sure, looking around the room, if Mr. Conley, who had testified, apparently he's in the back.
Mr. Conley, go ahead and have a seat. Senator Cohen?
And Mr. Chairman, on a serious note, I'll follow Senator Ortman's admonition and certainly not try to cut off a witness, but just a couple of questions, Mr. Conley. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Conley, do you have a response to Professor Carpenter's comment as to whether or not there's been any litigation that's ensued in the state of Minnesota relative to the passage 20 years ago of the amendment to the Human Rights Statute, and if you could specify any appellate case law or anything else?
In this state, I
Mr.
don't.
Conley.
Sorry, Senator. In this state, I don't, Senator. What I would say is, given the state of affairs in other states that have adopted same-sex marriage and given similar human rights acts throughout the country, once you adopt same-sex marriage, essentially what you have is the Human Rights Act raised to an order of magnitude that now, I think someone wrote that about 515 laws are implicated by marriage in this state. So if you consider how pervasive marriage is, I do think that you're going to see a potential for at least a start in this state. Certainly in other states, there have been many cases. I don't think I'm wrong that you're going to see an increase, but if we stipulate that I am wrong, then that is actually an argument for robust conscience exemptions, because if there is a minority, if it's such a small religious minority that is going to be affected by this broad, radical shift in marriage policy, then why wouldn't you protect that minority? I mean, it seems to me that if this push for same-sex marriage is predicated upon tolerance, then what you're saying is, my push for tolerance doesn't tolerate your dissent. So that would be my response to your question, Senator.
And Mr. Chairman, one other question, if I might. And maybe this is a bit of a far-fetched, I'll make it clear, hypothetical. But you made a reference to, I believe, the photographer in New Mexico, I think was the instance.
Yes, sir.
So let's just say hypothetically, because you made, not knowing her position or anything about her, this is, let me make it clear, a hypothetical, an extrapolation. Let's say the nature, because I think your testimony was her personal religious beliefs did not allow her to take photographs of a same-sex couple. I think that was the testimony. So let's say her personal religious beliefs were such that she did not want anything to do with any minority religion, say, for instance, that didn't accept Jesus Christ as the Savior. Under the same continuum, would she, if she was forced to take a photograph of a person of a minority religion under that circumstance, should she be allowed to do that?
Well, there would have to be, sorry, Senator. There would have to be some sort of message or belief. In other words, her religious belief couldn't be that her religious belief couldn't be, I object to the fact that black people exist, right? Now, if this was a black religion that said that Jesus is the Antichrist, under the First Amendment, yes, she could refuse to take that picture or photograph that event. But she couldn't do it. There would be no predicate for refusing if it was just that he was a minority. There would have to be some message or religious belief implicated. In other words, in taking the picture, if she ran a gas station, our client, the photographer, she couldn't say to a same-sex couple, I won't let you pump gas at my station. It doesn't implicate her belief. She's not being asked to express any message, to pass through any message. None of that is happening. She's not being asked to give approbation to their belief, to publicly state it as appropriate. None of that. That's what the Human Rights Act was created to do. That's where the fairness aspect comes in. Once you start saying that religious folks have to now render approbation to beliefs they find false under their religious code, well, now it seems to me that your tolerance has turned into tyranny.
But, and Mr. Chairman, just finally, because I appreciate
Senator Cohen.
the answer, but so again, using my hypothetical, because again, your testimony was this was her belief and not necessarily her church's belief or some institutional belief. It was her personal belief. So if her personal belief leads to a prohibition against some circumstance of a minority religion as opposed to same-sex marriage, would that then be permissible from your point of view?
I'm actually unclear about I'm unclear as to
well,
the nature of the question.
if her position is that I don't want to service somebody in the context of, say, the photograph of a minority religious marriage, which did not affirm Jesus Christ as the Savior, would she then be allowed to not take that photograph?
Right. So your hypothetical then would say that religious belief of that minority was at odds with the photographer's belief.
Correct.
And he wanted her to photograph that wedding in a positive light.
Yes.
So she could, under the First Amendment, then say, no, that religious belief I find to be at odds with my own, okay, under the First Amendment. She could refuse. Now, what I'd like to propose is, maybe this will make it a little clearer. Let's say we flipped the situation in our New Mexico case, and the plaintiff happened to be a photographer. So she's a lesbian photographer, and she's asked, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops sees a great video she did on the Special Olympics, how wonderfully she created it. It brought in millions of dollars in funding revenue. And the Catholic Church, the Conference of Catholic Bishops representative says, we want you to come to our conference on Catholic marriage, which is going to teach everybody in the Archdiocese how to go out and promote Catholic marriage, that marriage is only the union of a man and a woman. Under the Minnesota Human Rights Act, that lesbian photographer could not refuse, because religion, much like sexual orientation, is a protected category. I don't think that that's what Minnesotans want to see happen. There's a robust market where people can live lives that tolerate other people's views. This bill does not allow for that.
Senator Dibble.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, members. I just need to point out that there is no marriage in New Mexico for same-sex couples, so we just need to start there. And I'm glad, I'm grateful for Senator Cohen's line of inquiry, because Mr. Connolly has made it clear, Professor Connolly has made it clear that, for example, the Protestant photographer or wedding cake baker or restaurant banquet owner could, under what he would desire, a set of laws that he would desire, could refuse and decline to photograph a Catholic or a Hindu wedding, or host a Catholic or a Hindu wedding reception in their restaurant, or decline to bake them a cake. When folks offer themselves in the public sphere to provide goods and services to the public market, we don't allow for that kind of discrimination, that kind of refusal of service to folks who are different from ourselves. And we do that for a number of good reasons, because where would we draw the line? Where would we, cease with that? How would we even get our arms around defining those sorts of goods and services that give approbation? I don't even know what that means, but that somehow or another blur this line. We absolutely protect the right of belief and the right of conscience and the right to act however you would like to act within your own private sphere, the sphere of the church, or even when a religious affiliated organization offers some measure of goods and services within their own space, with their own resources, that have a nexus with their religious belief and practice. Once you've stepped out of that line, you're offering on a for-profit basis, you're in the public marketplace, we have protections against discrimination, because it's quite clear what our values and our belief system are. We are all equal under the eyes of the law. We're all free from that kind of refusal and discrimination. To step away from that, to move backwards from that, would be to draw all kinds of divisions in our society that don't support our democracy and our system of government in any way, shape, or form. We live in a civil society, in a pluralistic society, where we accommodate all kinds of differences. There was a debate, for example, a couple of years ago about cab drivers who didn't want to take dogs in their cabs from the airport because of their religious views. Seeing eye dogs. And they were told, you're offering a public service. You're not in your private religious sphere or space.
Senator Goodwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm wondering if I can ask a couple questions of Ms. Kirsten and Dr. Nevins. Is Dr. Nevins still here?
Yes, Mr. Connolly, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Kirsten and Dr. Nevins, if you still have, please come forward.
Doesn't look like he's here.
Senator Goodwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Kirsten, the way both you and Dr. Nevins talked a lot about heterosexual marriages and children and how important it was to have a mother and a father. And, I don't disagree with that. I'm just curious as to what you think about the changes in marriage now and in families that has become more pronounced over the years. For example, I think it's something like 2 out of 5 marriages don't work out. They end up in divorce. So those children are then left without a mother and a father in the same home at any rate, even if the mother and father are both attentive to the children. That view of marriage and children between a heterosexual, happy, well-adjusted couple is something to me like what we used to see on Leave It to Beaver or My 3 Sons, and we'd love to have it that way in every family, but it's just not the way that it is. So I do believe that with children that are in a happy family or with a happy person, single or not, are just as well off as those that are, and better off certainly than those that are in destructive marriages. But I just have to, if you're saying that that's so important to children, we do believe that a good, stable family is important to children, then would you say that that we should end the right to divorce in Minnesota?
Mr. Chair, Senator, of course I wouldn't say that we should end the right to divorce. What I would say is that we should take adult responsibility to children much more seriously in every aspect of life. And I agree with one of the former testifiers who spoke about no-fault divorce and how at the time no-fault divorce was enacted, very few people foresaw the devastating consequences that this would have in the lives of millions of children. I think the research here is very, very clear that children who are intact, biological parent married homes do better in terms of academic achievement, in terms of avoiding early sexual activity and teen pregnancy, crime, incarceration, educational attainment. The list goes on and on. I think there really is almost no dispute about this. So I would say, yes, that we need to redouble our efforts to ensure that as many children as possible have an engaged mother and father.
Well,
Senator Goodwin.
thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Kirsten, that's a great ideal. It's kind of a fantasy because I don't know how we do that. How do we make individual parents, individual marriages, how do we make them be whole and happy and secure for the children? And as you talk about no-fault divorce and the problems that have caused, I want to tell you that fault divorce caused a lot of problems with children. And I am one of those children that came from a divorced family. And my parents spent their time trying to prove each other was crazy so that the other one could get the kids. And that was a very ugly 2-year process and very destructive for 5 children. So again, I don't believe that no-fault divorce has made it any. Maybe it's made it a little easier to get divorced, but it's also made it a little less painful for children of those marriages. I can guarantee you that. I just have to say that, there's been some media about me being reluctant on this bill and hesitation on this bill. And I am hesitant. And I'm not hesitant for the reasons that I don't support same-sex marriage, because I'm an extremely strong supporter of same-sex marriage. My concern is that we need to make sure that when this goes on the floor, that we have enough votes to pass it. I don't want to see it fail. I don't want to think that this was brought up too soon. I don't want to discredit those people that went out and voted against their own religious beliefs and their own morals to not get this in the Constitution because they just knew that wasn't the right thing to do. And that doesn't necessarily mean an acceptance of gay marriage. And I do believe that we're going to have gay marriage in Minnesota, and the sooner the better. I just want you to know that that's what my hesitation is, to be respectful to all. And so with that, I just want to say I really would like you to rethink your issue about divorce, because when I tried to pass an amendment 2 years ago onto the anti-marriage bill on the floor, I was trying to say, let's see, if you really think that this is such a sacrament to be married between a heterosexual couple, that we shouldn't allow divorce. And of course, nobody voted, or very few voted in favor of that. So I just want you to kind of recognize that, in my opinion, this is a very hypocritical stand.
Senator Sharon.
Thank you. I have a question for Senator Dibble. First of all, thank you, Senator Dibble, for the language in your bill that addresses and protects and honors, I think, the differences that people have on this issue in relationship to their religious background and belief. I think that's critically important to speak to, and in coming to terms with how to address this issue, I share a high value that people of different faiths have the right within their belief system to exercise their religious beliefs, including in the area of marriage, exercising within their church sacramental marriage, and the right to not extend a sacramental marriage to a marriage that is outside of the belief system. So thank you for that. I think that needs to be protected. But one of the subjects that was discussed here, 2 different people talked about civil union or civil solution to the issue of marriage. I thought they both had different points. One was talking about the ineffectiveness of civil unions in a state and how they moved away from civil unions to marriage. But I thought in that testimony they were talking about delineating civil unions for same-sex couples while retaining marriage as a status for heterosexual couples. At least I understood the way the testimony was given, that the two groups were treated differently in terms of what they were called. The other testimony was, and I didn't get the name of the person who was struggling with this, asked the question of us as to why not the whole concept of civil union should be the only content in the state's legal statutes, that all what we call marriages now are debating about are contracts, are civil contracts about the terms and the conditions in which people manage their earnings or their affairs, or can engage in accessing private data during illness. Why would you not have every heterosexual or homosexual contractual relation to be treated as a civil issue and leave the concept of marriage, which has religious connotations, outside of the state's language? So you completely eradicate that use of that language and just focus on the definition of contractual relationships. And so I was asking if you would talk more about that.
Thanks. Thank
Senator
you.
Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the question, Senator Sharon. And it's a great question. I'm glad you recognize that creating a separate status for some kinds of people would create an unequal and, frankly, an inferior status. And so to create civil unions for some folks and not others is in very practical terms unworkable. And that has been the finding of state after state that has enacted civil unions, and they're scrapping them and moving to marriage. And that's appropriate. To your second question, and let me also say that it also creates kind of a larger set of social inequalities that we're familiar with from the experience of the South, the experience of South Africa, and the like, and that is simply unworkable as well over the long term, and creates all kinds of societal division and difference that's unnecessary. But the essential question is, why not civil unions for everyone, and scrap the term marriage for everyone, and everyone goes to civil unions, and if they want to get married, they can go to church and get married, and it really speaks to what is really being discussed here. I will concede the point that we in this country and in these sorts of debates, and it was evidenced by some of the testimony at this table, conflate marriage, civil marriage, and religious marriage, and we even do that in our ritual, in our ceremonies, in our practice. Many of us, if not most of us, when we get married, don't. We may go down. May send in an application for a marriage license, or go down to City Hall to get the marriage license. But then the marriage license is brought to the church. The marriage license is signed in the church office, either immediately before or immediately after the ceremony. So we kind of conflate the two completely in our minds about what it actually is. And the fact is that we have religious ritual, we have the civil aspects that then gain us access to all the rights and benefits and economic conditions that are in our statute books. But it's we're not seeking to redefine anything for anyone. This bill seeks to simply affirm what we already know to be true, and what we cherish and what we value. I think to seek a wholesale redefinition of something that is already well understood through practice and through ritual and through our understanding and what we do, and is actually not a radical step, as some people like to say from this table, but a very simple and small step to take, so that all people, like me and my husband, can simply step into the full enjoyment of the rights and freedoms and the benefits that are guaranteed by our state's constitution, and perhaps also go down to the chapel, get married, if that's what our church does. And so it's all a long-winded way of saying we're not seeking to create a wholesale redefinition. We're seeking to affirm what we already know to be true, and it's a small step. What you're describing, I think, is a much larger step, and probably not attainable from a practical and political point of view.
Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Dibble, some people might think that your inclusion is redefinition of marriage, simply because it's included. And yet, at the very same time, a redefinition of some business practices, the way clergy might speak from the pulpit, and perhaps even curriculums in our schools as a result of this bill passing will redefine those practices in the state. So I don't think I can go along with the idea that this is simply an inclusion. I think it is a redefinition by the inclusion. Now,
So,
I've got.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Senator Dibble.
Senator Limmer, can you point to me in the bill? Because I can point to you in the bill where that is specifically provided for, that there is no change to curriculum contemplated. There is no change to practices from the pulpit contemplated. In fact, specifically protected by existing language in our Human Rights Act, as well as reaffirmed by additional language in the bill before you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad we're welcoming a discussion on the real issues. In other states, we have plenty of example of where some of these civil legal actions have resulted in lawsuits involving citizens who, on conscientious objection, refuse to practice their business that would promote a lifestyle that they simply can't agree with. It's not that they are wanting to do harm to anyone, they just don't want to be included in that promotion. We've seen it where businesses in certain states, Massachusetts, New York, have been claimed that individuals have been sued, professionals have been sued when they've denied couples. Let's say a marriage counselor. A couple comes to them saying, patch up our gay marriage. And they don't believe in gay marriage. That's a dilemma for some people with a conscientious objection. We've heard of other countries punishing their clergy for reciting verses in their scripture regarding what they perceive as a danger of gay lifestyle. Simply reading from a Bible in some countries has become hate speech. And I think regardless of what we put in black and white in our law, that doesn't change the fact for some people that have a deep-held faith belief, just because we put it in black and white saying we're going to excuse you, it doesn't mean to those people that it's right. And so we have this discussion of consequence. What happens if? What happens if same-sex marriage is approved in our legislature? Can you tell me that these things in black and white that you proposed will not be challenged in the Supreme Court in this state, much less in the federal courts? I don't think you can make that assurance to me. So anything we write into statute is challengeable no matter what we call it. And I think there's a fear on the part of a number of people, a concern that passage of same-sex marriage may turn into a run on other policies in the state that they can't believe in. And I think it's, if we follow the example of other states, I think they probably have a rightful concern regarding that.
Senator Dibble.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and I have Professor Carpenter next to me who can speak to some of the specific cases from other states that often get cited. There's a handful, about 6 or 7 cases from other states we've heard already. I think we've heard all the cases that we hear about because they're the ones that people are fond of citing, none of which have anything to do with the provisions of this statute, nor really have anything to do with marriage, but have to do with existing anti-discrimination laws and protections that are already on the books in those states, and or of course jumping to Minnesota, nothing in this bill would propose and purport to change any of the protections we have, both in the free exercise of conscience and religion in those spheres, in those spaces in which we have fairly substantive and substantial protections, or to be free from discrimination as we're moving about our lives in the public sphere. I can't speak to other countries. We see all kinds of terrible things happening in other countries. We see people being murdered in their homes for their religious belief. The passage of this bill isn't going to have anything to do with those sorts of things, or I don't know what the situation is in Canada, but if we start murmuring darkly about other countries, there'll be no end of debate on any policies that are in front of the legislature. If we try to infer what might happen in other countries or how other countries might influence our policies here. But I would just refer you, I have a handout, 2 handouts. One is the Constitution of the State of Minnesota Bill of Rights, which says plainly, the enumeration of rights in this Constitution shall not deny or impair others retained by and inherent in the people. The right of every man and woman, I presume, to worship God according to the dictates of his or her own conscience shall never be infringed, nor shall anyone be compelled to attend, erect, or support any place of worship or maintain any religious or ecclesiastical ministry against his consent, nor shall any control of or interference with the rights of conscience be permitted, or any preference be given by law to any religious establishment or mode of worship. But the liberty of conscience hereby secured shall not be so construed as to excuse acts of licentiousness or justify practices inconsistent with the peace or safety of the state, nor shall any money be drawn from the treasury for the benefit of any religious societies or religious or theological seminaries. Pretty straightforward. Protection of religious freedoms and guarding against the religious intrusion in other people's free exercise thereof.
Senator Dibble, before you go on, I'm just going to let folks know we're going to bring this to a vote at about 2:45. So let's keep that in mind.
So, I'll just go back, Mr. Chair, to my original arguments that we provide some of the broadest exemptions and accommodations for folks to exercise their religious beliefs in the sphere and space that we protect those. When folks step out of that space and they're in the larger civil society, they're offering goods and services, public accommodations, for a whole host of reasons, the good of the order. I'll read from some documents that articulate it better than I do. The interest of fostering individual dignity, the creation of a climate environment in which each individual can utilize his or her potential to contribute to and benefit from society, and equal protection of the life, liberty, and property that the Founding Fathers guaranteed to us all. Imagine if any of us who enters a bakery, a restaurant, a hotel, a clothing store, a print shop, or any other commercial establishment were not able to be served as others are served, regardless of the religious views of the proprietor or employees may hold about particular groups of people. This guarantee, eroding this guarantee of equal access to the marketplace, Mr. Chair, where would we draw that line? This bill does nothing to change or inhibit people's religious views and beliefs, nor does it inhibit individuals' rights to be free from discrimination in the marketplace. We're not contemplating that. Fundamental underpinning of this bill is that love and commitment, responsibility, family as expressed through marriage, are freedom, and a freedom that's guaranteed in our Constitution by virtue of our birth and our virtue of citizenship of this state. And we figure out how to get along in the public sphere.
I will note there's a whole body of Supreme Court law going back decades dealing with the freedom of religion clauses in the United States Constitution. And we're not going to be able to answer every question within any particular statute, and there are going to be individual fact patterns that are going to have to be sorted out by the courts. That's the nature of our political system and our form of government. And that's okay. that's okay. That's the way that disputes get resolved and things get clarified, and sometimes we even get ideas for statutory adjustments in response to that. And Minnesota's freedom of religion or freedom of conscience clause is in many ways stronger than the federal one is, and our Supreme Court has interpreted that as well.
Mr. Chair,
Senator Dibble?
Professor Carpenter wanted to jump in on this briefly, if he could.
Senator Latz and members of the committee, I just wanted to add that nothing in the marriage bill provides any cause of action for any person for discrimination. Any lawsuit that was filed would have to be based on the Minnesota Human Rights Act. There is a body of law at least this thick on the Minnesota Human Rights Act. I can tell you very little of it has to do with sexual orientation, because there have been very few cases, I can only think of 2, that have been very protective of religious freedom. The statute itself is protective of religious freedom. It seems to me many of the objections that we've heard, the concerns we've heard about religious exemptions and religious freedom, are really concerns about the Minnesota Human Rights Act. They're not concerns about the bill. So consideration of changes to a 20-year commitment to non-discrimination on this state deserves a separate bill and a separate discussion, not the marriage bill. The 515 rights that are at stake in Minnesota because of this bill are not statutes that grant individual rights against private parties. They are statutory provisions that guarantee equality vis-a-vis the government. Things like inheriting a hunting license when your spouse dies. Those are not rights that expand private causes of action against individuals. The other states, there have been tens of thousands of marriages in this country for same-sex couples in the United States. Not one of them was based on the existence of a marriage for the cause of action. Not one of them was defeated based on a cause of action for someone who was married or not. So far, so good. The foreign countries, none of those countries have the protections of the Constitution that I embrace and that I know that the members of this committee fully embrace, that the United States has.
Senator Hall.
Senator Hall had your hand up, and just we got about 5 minutes left in this discussion.
Well, I might take a little more than that.
Well, we are going to come to a vote within 5 to 10 minutes, Senator Hall, so just keep that in mind.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know I haven't spoken up much at all. Matter of fact, this whole 3 hours, so I was hoping to get a little bit more. But let me start off by saying I think all Minnesotans care about this issue. And all Minnesotans, I believe, want to recognize and appreciate every person involved on both sides of the issue. We want to treat everybody with love and respect. That's what we're called to do. And we can still do this without redefining marriage. I don't think marriage should be changed. A male, the father, and a female, the mother, should be committed together to raise, if possible, the healthiest of families, to give the children the best opportunity, because it really is about kids. Marriage is based on truth and values that men and women are complementary. It's a biological fact that reproduction depends on a man and a woman, and the reality that children need both a father and mother. That's our goal. That's what we put up for a high standard. That's what we should try to obtain. My parents were divorced. Was it the best thing? No. But the goal is what we should be putting up in the best as a society. Not to push down or give people make people second rate. That's not the idea. You put up the goal and the best to achieve. The marriage relationship is the bedrock of our community, our civil society. It needs to be strengthened, not redefined. We, the government, can treat people equally and with respect, and respect their liberty without redefining marriage. Redefining marriage would further distance marriage from the needs of children and deny the importance of mothers and fathers, weaken monogamy, exclusivity, and permanency the norms through which marriage benefits society and strengthens religious liberty. As I listened to some of the testimony, I asked these questions to myself. Is it about romantic sexual relationship? Or it is about the benefits, the money? What is it that you really want? Marriage doesn't make you more or less valuable. You're all valuable. One sheet was passed around and talked about the new family structure. Forever and ever we've had a certain family structure, but we think we're so prideful that we can change the family structure? I question that. We don't change a great structure that we have. We don't certainly do it for talent wars, as one testifier said. And one testifier said, if I don't agree with same-sex marriage, and that I must be a bully. That's bullying, she said. So I don't agree with it, so I'm a bully. So they're already name-calling? I have a problem with that. I can't tell you how many letters I've gotten that said, you're a bigot, or tweets, you're a bigot because you disagree. Really? Really? I'm trying to be a nice guy, but I have a different opinion. And so now you're labeling me, name-calling me. By the way, the church right now can marry homosexual couples, same-sex couples. They may not be recognized by the state, but the state is here to recognize that which is best for the family and the children. One testifier said, we're all fine, those of us that have been raised by same-sex couples. Really? All? You represent all? All children are fine with same-sex parents? Not the ones that I've talked to. And you could take a vow without getting married. I don't want to redefine. I don't think actually we can redefine marriage. We can do it in these laws. But God is the only one that defines marriage. And marriage is not a selfish act, but it's a giving act. It's not about what you can get. It's about what you contribute. Let's leave it to the church, and let's keep the government out of it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Cohn.
Mr. Chairman, I know that you like to run a tight ship. I think the magnitude of this issue, rises to a significant level, and certainly Senator Dibble should have, as author of the bill, the last comment before we vote. I just want to make, I've never done this before, to talk about my seniority in this place. But as the third-ranking member of the Senate, I can suggest that I've been through quite a bit in the institution. And I think I'm one of only 5 people in the Senate who was a member of the Senate 20 years ago when I was proud to be a member of both of this committee and on the floor of the Senate when we added sexual orientation to the Human Rights Statute. I think Senator Limmer was then a member of the House and was present for the House debate. And the comment I wanted to make, and I want to choose my words very carefully because this is a different era, a different issue. But in looking at the history of this legislature, say that the history of 20th century America, I think one of the most significant events, I would argue one of the 2 most significant events in 20th century American history was the Southern Civil Rights Movement. The legislative culmination of that, of course, was the passage of the 64 Civil Rights Act and the 65 Voting Rights Act. And I've often wondered what it would have been like to have been a member of the Congress. There are only 2 people who are actually still in the Congress who voted for either one of those bills. Vice President Mondale was in his first year in the Senate to vote for the Voting Rights Act in '65. And I'm not suggesting that necessarily one issue equates to the other, because, again, it's a different era, a different issue. But in voting this issue, I honestly believe that we have the opportunity to vote in a way that will be noted 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years from now. And this is not in any way to suggest the lack of sincerity on the part of members of this committee or members of this body who vote opposite myself. But I think we get the chance to vote to be on the right side of history. And as somebody who's been in this body for a long time, I don't think I've ever said that before, other than what we did 20 years ago. The difference between today and 20 years ago is the work we did 20 years ago did not complete the affirmation of citizens of this state to be whole citizens. I think the vote we cast today does do that.
Senator Dibble, closing remarks? Senator Sharon, did you?
Well, I know you want to close this out. I just felt compelled to acknowledge Senator Hall's articulation of his religious beliefs and I was raised in a faith that articulated things very similarly to you about the goal of marriage is around the procreation and the raising of children. And in many ways in my church, the purpose of marriage is exclusively that, and if that's not the goal, even if not actually happening, it ought to be the goal and the purpose of marriage and the purpose of sexual interaction. But that's no longer my belief, and I don't think it's necessarily shared by all religious groups any longer. I think marriage is about stability and about how we do a public statement about a relationship and ask for and give a solemn oath of commitment and fidelity through hardship and difficulties to stay together and to support each other even in our worst times in it with our most offensive shortcomings. And that through that is stability and confidence that you have a system surrounding you that will support you always. My point is there's probably as many definitions of what it means outside of the civil arrangements that are provided and law that's provided through the state as to what marriage is in the various churches. And I am, as Senator Cohen said, I really think this is an incredible moment to be a part of in the history of the state. And I intend fully to support this bill, Senator Dibble, because I don't think we need two tiers. But I would like you to know that in many ways my preference would be what I was talking about, that the state really stayed in relationship to contractual relationships and terms and conditions of a contract, and that marriage as a concept stayed religious or outside of the realm of the state. That would be my preference. But short of that, I absolutely am in support of what it is that is indicated in this bill.
Senator Dibble, closing remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. I will try to be brief. Two points to make. One is this is about family. David Patton handed this photo to me after he concluded his testimony. This is his son. These are his dads. Look at what you see here. Beautiful child, but as importantly, beautiful, loving grandpas. I would caution those who are opposed to this bill to use language that's dismissive, diminutive of families. When you use language like ego gratification and property rights over children, this is about coming to the legislature, spirit of generosity, of affirmation of the things that we already know and hold to be true and precious and sacred in all of our lives. It's about the love of family and the love of coming together to support each other, to support children, to support our extended family, to draw in the support of our community. And it's also very much, of course, about the civil aspects. Even Senator Hall's testimony was quite confused. Is this about the civil aspects and the access to the rights and benefits that are found in our laws, or do we leave it to the churches and to God? This is about people working hard, taking responsibility, trying to get along, being good citizens, and government right now is standing on their necks. Government is actively barring some families and some couples
from the access to their own freedoms that are guaranteed in their own Constitution, and by extension, all the laws in our statute books. Yeah, we want to get government out of this by making sure that folks have access in the way that we can all support and strengthens something we already know and love and cherish. Members, nothing is redefined. Only good things result if we were to pass Senate File 925. I thank you for your time. This was an excellent discussion. It was civil, as is in the tradition of Minnesota, and I always appreciate that. And I ask for your support for Senate File 925. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Cohen.
Mr. Chairman, I move that Senate File 925 as amended be recommended to pass.
Roll call, Mr. Chair.
Senator Cohen has moved that Senate File 925 as amended be recommended to pass. There's been a request for a roll call. There'll be a roll call taken.
Senator Latz.
Yes.
Senator Hall.
No.
Senator Ortman.
No.
Senator Cohen.
Yes.
Senator Limmer.
No.
Senator Goodwin.
Yes.
Senator Sharon.
Yes.
Senator Dietzick.
Yes.
There being 5 yes votes and 3 no votes, the motion prevails. Senate File 925 is sent to the Senate floor for further consideration. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members.